Antoine Walker, employee number 8, Cybertoine, call him whatever you want, but also call him a problem. A key piece of the '96 national championship winning Kentucky Wildcats, Walker was a matchup nightmare. A big man who could go to work down low, while also possessing ball handling and quickness that a player his size shouldn't have, and the passing vision to be a point forward. Or he could use his shooting range to hit it from deep. Only problem was that he fell in love with that perimeter shot, and while he could hit it, he also settled for it, and overall seemed to gravitate towards the most difficult shots. But he was still one of the most versatile scorers in the league during his prime, and gave the Boston Celtics their first semblance of a star after Bird's retirement and Lewis's passing. Then when Paul Pierce arrived, the two became one of the NBA's highest scoring duos for years, with some playoff success to show for it, before Walker made a few more stops and picked up a ring in his later years. And while it wasn't perfect, he could pass, rebound, and definitely score. But for Antoine Walker, it was all in a day's work.
And that's me. Employee number 8.
Let's jog your memory. Growing up in Chicago, Antoine Walker was one of the many great athletes to suit up for Mount Carmel High School, even playing alongside future Pro Bowl quarterback Donovan McNabb during his time with the Caravans. And after Walker had a great junior year, which saw him average over 23 and 11 while being named All-State, he was the hottest recruit in the state, with his family even setting up a phone mail service to avoid constant recruitment calls going into his senior year. But Walker's senior year got off to a weird start, as Walker was suspended for the first 3 games by violating team rules for playing in an outside tournament during the school year. But the rest of the season went pretty well, with Walker even putting up 43 points and 32 rebounds in a single game. And he would soon after make his college decision, as he would commit to Kentucky, before ending his senior season by being voted both a Parade First-Team All-American and McDonald's All-American. But going to Kentucky would be an adjustment for Walker, as he was joining one of the most talented rosters in the nation. So plain and simple, the Wildcats were stacked, with future NBA talent throughout their roster. So even though Walker was a top recruit, the Wildcats were already set at the forward position, with juniors Roderick Rhodes and Walter McCarty, as Walker spent his season coming off the bench. Yet even though Walker wasn't starting, he was garnering high praise from his head coach Rick Pitino, who saw some similarities in Walker and a great forward who had recently attended Kentucky in Jamal Mashburn. But the biggest criticism that would follow Walker throughout his career was already being highlighted as a college freshman, as Pitino would also say that if Walker took smarter shots, he would have been able to crack the starting lineup. But while Walker didn't have a huge role on the team, he was still an important scorer and rebounder off the bench. And he seemed okay with that, knowing that his time would come eventually. And the fact that Kentucky was winning made it a lot easier, as the Wildcats finished the regular season at 22-4. But it was during the SEC tournament when Walker would really break out, starting with a modest 9 points and 5 boards in a win over Auburn. But then he would drop 21 points in 19 minutes in a win over Florida. Then in the title game versus Arkansas, Walker scored a game-high 23 points, as Kentucky won the SEC championship, and Walker won tournament MVP. And now the Wildcats were heading to the NCAA tournament. Walker had a solid round 1, as he put up 10 points and 8 rebounds in an easy win over Mount St. Mary's. Then he would pull down another 8 rebounds while chipping in 6 points in another convincing win over Tulane in round 2. Kentucky kept rolling in the Sweet 16 with a big win over Arizona State. However, even though Walker pulled down 10 rebounds, he struggled from the field, shooting 3 of 13 and scoring 9 points. But the Elite 8 brought one of the best teams in the country in North Carolina, and Walker had a game to forget, shooting 1 of 5 from the field and racking up 4 fouls in just 9 minutes of action, as Kentucky's season came to an end, with Walker's freshman year ending with him averaging about 8 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. But Kentucky only got better going into the following season. So Walker was already set to have a much larger role in '96, but with Rhodes transferring, Walker had even less competition. Yet even though Kentucky had lost one of their best players from last year, They were bringing in a lot more talent, welcoming freshman recruit Ron Mercer, as well as junior transfer Derek Anderson. And these additions would turn Kentucky into one of the most dominant college basketball teams of all time. And Walker would have his fingerprints all over this season, as Walker was named first team All-SEC after acting as the team's second best scorer behind Tony Delk and their top rebounder, and just an all-around mismatch, as Walker had the skill set, size, and rebounding ability to play the 3 through the 5. And with Walker spending more time down low, he saw a noticeable improvement in his field goal percentage due to taking higher percentage shots. But the poor decision-making was still present as he led the Wildcats in turnovers. But with the offense Kentucky had, it didn't really matter, as they were running teams out of the gym pretty much every game. They would suffer a defeat to UMass in the second game of the year, but then didn't look back after this, as game after game, they were making winning look easy. And after the UMass loss, they wouldn't lose again for the rest of the regular season, winning 25 in a row, with 23 of those wins coming by double digits. And during the season, the sophomore Walker was emerging as a leader on a stacked Wildcats team. But that didn't mean he wasn't having fun and breaking out his trademark shimmy often. So Kentucky would roll through the regular season, finishing at 26-1 going into the conference tourney, where they would extend their winning streak to 27 with convincing wins over Florida and Arkansas. But then in the title game, Kentucky was shocked by Mississippi State, as they lost by double digits. But now they had something to prove heading into the NCAA tournament. Walker did a bit of everything in a first-round win over San Jose State, putting up 14 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists, while also recording 6 steals. And he kept his great play going in round 2 versus Virginia Tech, finishing with 21 points and 11 rebounds in another win. It was another top-notch performance for Walker in the Sweet 16 versus Utah, as he finished with 19 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. But he would struggle in the Elite 8 versus a Tim Duncan-led Wake Forest team, as he shot just 3 of 11 from the field. But the rest of the offense was on point in yet another easy Wildcats win, as they were heading to the Final Four to take on UMass. And Walker got back on track with an efficient 14 points, along with 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and 4 steals. And Kentucky needed it, as this was their first close game of the tourney. But in the end, the Wildcats came out on top with a 7-point win, and if they could take down Syracuse, they'd be national champs. However, Walker again couldn't get many shots to fall, as he finished with just 11 points. But the entire Kentucky team struggled against Syracuse's defense. Yet Walker compensated for it by adding 9 rebounds, 4 assists, and 4 steals. And the Wildcats turned to their defense to shut down the Orange and secure the 6th national championship in program history, as Walker finished the season averaging about 15 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. But now Walker had a year as a starter under his belt and had delivered, showing an incredible versatility to his game, as he could score and rebound like a big man, but also possessed the skills to be either a stretch 4 or a point forward. So with upside that went through the roof, Walker declared for the 1996 NBA draft, and he wouldn't be waiting long in the green room.
96 NBA draft, the Boston Celtics select Antoine Walker from the University of Kentucky.
So Antoine Walker was going to one of the most storied franchises in all of sports, but he would get the seal of approval from Larry Bird after he was selected. But that wouldn't go far, as in Boston, it was all about winning. However, they hadn't been winning at the expected rate since Bird's retirement in '92. But Walker was a player who truly had star potential. Yet while it wasn't certain where Walker would slot in with power forward Dino Raja in year 1, knee issues would ruin Raja's season and subsequently end his NBA career, which meant opportunity for Walker, and he didn't waste it, as Walker became a full-time starter when Raja went down and mostly played power forward, but even was used at center at times in a small ball lineup due to Purvis Ellison missing time. And Walker continued to show his versatility in the NBA, as the rookie would lead the Celtics in scoring and rebounding while adding over 3 assists per game, and would even pull down a career-high 21 rebounds in a late-season loss to Orlando. So Walker was putting up numbers for the Celtics, and in a fast-paced offense, he was getting plenty of shooting opportunities. But there wasn't any defense being played in Boston, and Celtics fans would have to endure the most embarrassing season in franchise history, as after a horrible 11-33 start, the Celtics won just 4 more games the rest of the season to finish at a franchise-worst 15-67. But Walker's season was something to be hopeful about, as a nightly double-double threat, who even added 2 triple-doubles, and was one of the league's top rookies, even being named first-team All-Rookie behind averages of about 17.5 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. But going into the following season, the Boston Celtics looked more like the Boston Wildcats. So after the worst season in franchise history, the Celtics brought in a new coach, yet it was none other than Rick Pitino, Walker's coach at Kentucky. But it didn't stop there, as Pitino would draft Ron Mercer in the '97 NBA draft, and then just weeks before the season started, he made a trade to acquire Walter McCarty, as these two would join Walker in the starting lineup for most of the season. And while Walker had already been among the league leaders in shot attempts last year, he really got the green light with Pitino at the helm, and the shots started flying, as Walker attempted the second most shots in the league. But in Pitino's offense, some of Walker's flaws from college were coming out more than last year, as while he was scoring significantly more, his efficiency dropped, and with the ball in his hands more than last year, Walker would lead the league in turnovers. But none of that affected Walker's unshakable confidence, and all things considered, he was still averaging over 22 and 10 in year 2 as a top 5 scorer in the NBA, which included a career-high 49 points on 58% shooting in a January 1st loss to Washington, and his big numbers got him voted to his first career All-Star game. But Pitino seemed to be relying too much on his Kentucky lineup, as Walker, Mercer, and McCarty accounted for over half of Boston's shot attempts per game, and the Celtics were one of the worst shooting teams in the league. However, they had improved on defense, which led to a much more respectable season, but at 36-46, they would again miss the playoffs, as Walker's second season would end with him averaging about 22.5 points, 10 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. But after the '98 NBA draft, Celtics fans would have a high-scoring duo for years to come.
The Boston Celtics select Paul Pierce from the University of Kansas.
So the '98 draft saw Kansas star Paul Pierce somehow fall to Boston at the 10th pick, as he and Walker looked like they could be the future of the team, even though in the beginning, Walker didn't even see Pierce as a starter, let alone a future star. But it wasn't just these two, as Boston still had a second-year Ron Mercer and would get a full season with Kenny Anderson at point guard, who they had acquired at the deadline last year, so offense didn't look to be a problem for Boston. But their guy was still Walker, even after public feuding with Pitino, as the Kentucky ties weren't as strong as they once were, with the Celtics even exploring trade options for Walker. But in the end, they committed to Walker long-term, as he agreed to a huge deal shortly before the '99 season, and had become one of the league's most popular players, made more evident by him gracing the cover of NBA Live '99. But after the Celtics gave him so much money, they would be quite disappointed when Walker showed up to camp out of shape after the extended offseason that the players had due to the lockout. And you could see the effects in Walker's play, and the fans were expressing their disapproval. While it was understandable for Walker to see a drop in his numbers, with the Celtics having many mouths to feed on offense, he would see his shooting percentage drop for the 3rd straight season, as he was settling for difficult shots even more often, and attempting more threes per game than he ever had. Yet he was making nearly 37% of them. But good or bad, Walker was producing. Yet while the Celtics were playing solid, they just weren't quite playoff level. And they would go 3-7 to end the season, as Walker would miss 8 of the team's final 10 games, which also marked the first time he had missed games in his NBA career, as the Celtics finished at 19-31 and missed the playoffs, with Walker's season ending with him averaging about 18.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. Walker continued seeing his name in a lot of trade rumors going into the 2000 season, and Pitino still wasn't thrilled about Walker's weight. But Walker started the season as a Celtic and once again played and started in all 82 games, and returned to being a 20-point-per-game scorer, while doing so on slightly improved shooting. However, the points weren't often coming from long range, as he would shoot a career-low 25.6% from deep. But Walker was still the top scorer and top rebounder for the Celtics, and while his play could be frustrating, you knew he was going to be out there, But someone who wasn't out there was Mercer, as with the emergence of Pierce, the Celtics decided that Mercer was expendable and shipped him away in the offseason. But things were looking up after Boston started the year 3-0, and Walker was still producing night in and night out, with one of the best games of his career coming in a March 8th win over Milwaukee, when he finished with 30 points on 55% shooting, along with 19 rebounds and 10 assists. But this was one of Boston's final wins of the year, as while they were hanging around in the playoff picture most of the season, a 10-game losing streak late in the year destroyed their playoff hopes, as they would finish at 35-47 and miss the playoffs, as Walker averaged about 20.5 points, 8 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. Walker started the 0-1 season hot, with an efficient 33-point, 12-rebound double-double on opening night, and was doing his usual scoring this season at about 21.5 points on about 42% shooting over the team's first 34 games. But Boston was sitting at a disappointing 12-22, and it didn't look like Pitino could turn the Celtics around, so instead he would step down, and assistant coach Jim O'Brien would take over. But this change likely made Walker very happy for multiple reasons. So with Walker and Pitino constantly butting heads, Walker was probably relieved to see him go. But looking back on it now, their new coach seemed like he had come from the future, with the way he implemented the long-range shot into the offense. And no one was happier about that than Antoine Walker, as while Walker had already been attempting over 5 threes per game with Pitino coaching, under O'Brien he would up that to nearly 9 per game, as he would lead the league in both attempted and made threes, and would see his scoring jump to nearly 25 points per game for the rest of the season. But overall, this would be the first season of Walker's career in which he didn't lead the team in scoring, as Pierce became a true star in 0-1. But that's pretty much all O'Brien had to work with, as Anderson would miss significant time, and after Walker and Pierce, the team's next highest scorer was Bryant Stith, at less than 10 points per game. However, even though Walker wasn't the team's top scorer, he had put up a career-high scoring average, and was still their best rebounder. And while he had always been a good passer for his size, with Anderson missing so much time, Walker would spend more time as a point forward, and would put up a career-high 5.5 assists per game. But with this also came some poor decisions, as Walker's career-high 301 turnovers would be second in the NBA. But with the Celtics acting as the highest volume three-point shooting team in the league, they would actually go a respectable 24-24 under O'Brien, but their overall 36-46 finish still wouldn't be enough for the playoffs, as Walker finished the season with averages of about 23.5 points, 9 rebounds, and 5.5 assists per game. O'Brien remained coach going into the 0-2 season, and the Celtics' playstyle remained the same, as they again shot the most three-pointers in the league, and the majority of those came from Antoine Walker, as he again led the league in three-point attempts, and finished second in makes, with career highs in both categories, as Walker was hoisting up 8 threes per game, and while he made nearly 35% of them, they also accounted for nearly 40% of his shots, as his overall shooting would drop to below 40% for the first time in his career. But Pierce and Walker were still one of the league's top scoring duos, with Walker again leading the Celtics in rebounding and dishing 5 assists per night, as these two were carrying the Celtics, and would each be recognized with all-star selections. And with Boston playing their best defense in years, while exploiting the three-point shot on offense, they were winning and sitting at 31-23 around the trade deadline, when they would include promising rookie Joe Johnson in a trade to Phoenix to bolster their bench, as they would acquire Rodney Rogers and Walker's Kentucky teammate Tony Delk, and they kept it going post-trade, with the Celtics finishing one game short of 50 wins, but their 49-33 record was their best in a decade, and would get Walker and Pierce their first taste of the postseason. Round 1 brought the defending conference champion Sixers, but Walker and Pierce looked more than ready. Pierce would put up some MVP level numbers in the first round series, but Walker wasn't far behind, as he would average over 24 points and 8 rebounds, and would drop at least 20 points in every game. And more impressive was his efficiency, as after a poor shooting performance in Game 1, he shot over 46% from the field and 50% from deep, as overall for the series, he drained 23 pointers, and the Celtics knocked off the Sixers in 5 games. Round 2 brought the Pistons and their strong defense, And Walker would have his struggles against Detroit, as while he was again the team's second leading scorer, his efficiency had dropped. But while the games were low scoring, they were going in Boston's favor, as the Celtics took a 2-1 lead before Walker put up his playoff career high of 30 points, while uncharacteristically hitting 9 out of 10 free throws in Game 4, as Boston went up 3-1, then got their 4th straight win of the series a couple nights later, as Boston was making an unexpected trip to the Eastern Conference Finals. Walker again struggled from the field in this series, but overall he was contributing in many ways, nearly averaging a double-double as the team's second leading scorer and leading rebounder, while also recording nearly 2.5 steals per night. And with Boston stealing Game 2 in New Jersey, the series was tied heading back home, where Game 3 would be one of the most memorable in Celtics history. Walker would only have a modest 16 points in this game, but Pierce would lead a legendary fourth quarter comeback, as Boston took a 2-1 lead. Then after a 30-point performance from Walker in Game 4, Pierce had a chance to send it to overtime at the free throw line, but he couldn't convert the first, and then Boston couldn't convert the putback after Pierce missed the second, as they had let New Jersey back in the series. And with Walker shooting just 12 of 40 over the next 2 games, New Jersey wrapped it up in 6, as Walker's season ended with him averaging about 22 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. The Celtics continued to live and die by the 3 in 0-3, with Walker leading the way at about 7.5 attempts per game, which even got him a spot in the 3-point shootout, where he put together a rough performance. But at this point, Walker was addicted to the 3, as well over a third of his shots came from beyond the arc, which led to his overall shooting percentage dropping to below 39%, while his free throw percentage also dropped significantly from last year. But he was playing on a sore knee for part of the season, and with the team trading away Anderson, Walker would act as their top distributor, and while he wasn't consistent, he was reliable, as he still gave you about 20 points a night, while no one else on the team outside of Pierce even cracked 10 points. And on top of that, he averaged over 41 minutes a night for the 3rd straight season. And while he did play the second lowest game total of his career up to that point, it was still 78 games. So the Celtics offense would only go as far as Pierce and Walker would take them. And for the 2nd straight year, both players would represent the C's in the All-Star game. And Boston would still have a solid season, as they survived a 6-game losing skid late in the year and finished at 44-38, which got them a return to the playoffs and a matchup with Indiana. Pierce would again lead the way, with Walker following close behind in most major statistical categories. Walker would score in double figures in every game, and did so pretty efficiently, and the Celtics would get out to a 3-1 lead. Then although they couldn't wrap it up in Game 5, they would finish off the Pacers with a Game 6 blowout, and now Round 2 would give them a chance to get their revenge on New Jersey. But this series was a nightmare for Walker, as he was completely shut down by the Nets defense, averaging just 14 points on less than 35% shooting, and it was nothing like last year, as the Celtics went down quietly in a sweep, with Walker's season ending with him averaging about 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. But during their second round series, the Celtics hired a new GM, and it would mark the beginning of the end for Antoine Walker in Boston. So Boston brought in Danny Ainge, and as soon as he was hired, there was already whispers about Walker's future in Boston, as he had to continue playing the Pacers series, wondering if it would be his last in a Celtics uniform. But Ainge was quick to shut down those rumors, saying soon after his hiring that there was no plan to trade Walker. But then October rolled around, and less than 2 weeks before the season started, Ainge made a deal. So Ainge sent a package headlined by Walker to the Dallas Mavericks, and while Ainge would repeatedly call it a business decision, Walker thought otherwise, as he was convinced it was more personal than business. But now Walker was joining a Mavs team who were already one of the league's premier offenses, with Dirk Nowitzki, Steve Nash, and Michael Finley. And Don Nelson felt like Walker's versatility was the perfect addition to his run-and-gun offense, as Walker could occupy his usual power forward, with Dirk moving to center. And while Walker was no Dirk, he could do similar things at the power forward position. And with Dallas also bringing in Antoine Jamison to be their 6th man, their offense looked unstoppable on paper. And that rang true, as they were the league's highest scoring team. Yet Walker was in unfamiliar territory on a team with so much talent, as after averaging nearly 21 points per game over his first 7 years in Boston, He put up only 14 points per game this year, which was the 5th highest mark on the team. Yet he still finished second on the team in rebounds and assists, and didn't miss a game all year. And the Mavs rode their offense to a 52-30 record, and a first-round matchup with Sacramento. But Walker turned in another ice-cold series from the field, as he averaged less than 10 points on about 36% shooting, while making just one of his 10 3-point attempts. But Dallas as a whole had a rough series, as the team shot below 40%, and Sacramento wrapped up the series in 5 games, with Walker's year in Dallas ending with him averaging about 14 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game. But after such a disappointing playoff loss, the Antoine experiment was over. During the offseason, Dallas would package Walker in a trade to the Atlanta Hawks, as Walker was joining one of the worst teams in the league, but he would return to putting up big scoring by necessity, as outside of Al Harrington, the Hawks didn't have a lot on the offensive end. So Walker was again averaging over 20 points and nearly 10 boards. And while he was still taking shots further out, more than you'd expect a power forward to, it had become the lesser of two evils in a way, with this being the second straight season of Walker shooting about 55% from the charity stripe, as employing the hack-a-shack technique on Walker had become a viable option for opponents. But after 53 games with the Hawks, Walker found out that he had again been traded, but probably was shocked when he was told where. So Walker was back in Boston, as Ainge would say that the acquisition of Walker was something that could immediately help a 27-28 Celtics team trying to make a playoff push, but also wouldn't jeopardize their future. And with Walker being in a contract year, it was pretty clear that Ainge didn't have plans to re-sign him after the season. But Walker was back with his old running mate, a guy who he would say in later years was his favorite teammate he ever played with. And while it hadn't been that long since Walker left, it was no longer a two-man show, with the Celtics featuring six-man Ricky Davis. And now employee number 8 was back in the Celtics green, except he was employee number 88 for the first 2 games, before taking his old number back from rookie Al Jefferson, as Walker would start all 24 games he played for the Celtics and act as their second leading scorer and top rebounder, and more importantly would help them go 18-9 the rest of the way, to finish at 45-37 and get a first-round matchup with Indiana. It wouldn't be like it was before, but it was like old times seeing Pierce and Walker lead the Celtics into the playoffs. Yet Walker would only average about 15 points over the first 3 games, as the Celtics fell behind 2-1. And Game 3 would also see Walker make contact with a ref, which led to a suspension for Game 4, which Boston would win. But a poor Game 5 from Walker saw Boston fall behind 3-2. Then even though Walker helped stave off elimination in Game 6, Boston would fall in 7, and Walker's overall season ended with him averaging about 19 points, 9 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. But another trade was coming for Walker. However, this time, it brought some good results. Over the offseason, Walker was included in the largest trade in NBA history at the time, as not only did he end up on a contender in the Miami Heat, but he had also signed another massive contract with Boston prior to the trade. The Heat had star power in their duo of Shaquille O'Neal and Dwyane Wade, but they were lacking depth last year, as Walker was one of many veteran pieces that Pat Riley brought in to make a championship push in 2006. And for the first time in his career, Walker would come off the bench, as he would act as the team's 6th man and turn in the most efficient shooting season of his career. And as the year went on, Walker adjusted and excelled in his new role. But the Heat were underwhelming, starting the season at 11-10 before Pat Riley replaced Stan Van Gundy as head coach, and led the team to a 52-30 record, which got them a first-round matchup with Chicago. And with Walker cracking the starting lineup near the end of the regular season, he'd remain a starter throughout the playoffs. Walker had solid production in round 1, putting up about 15 points and 6 rebounds, as the team's 3rd leading scorer. And while his efficiency took a big hit from the regular season, it was still important to the Heat to have a proven scorer like Walker as a fallback when defenses keyed in on Miami's duo. And while Chicago would tie the series after 4 games, Miami won the next 2 to advance to round 2. Walker would be a lot better in round 2. His numbers didn't change much, but his efficiency was great, as he shot about 49% from the field and 44% from deep, while attempting a series-leading 34 three-pointers. It didn't start well, as Walker scored just 10 points across the first 2 games, with the team splitting them, but over the next 3, he averaged nearly 20 points and hit 13 3-pointers, which included him scoring a game-high 23 points and draining a dagger 3 as Miami clinched the Game 5 win and the series over the New Jersey Nets. The conference finals brought the Pistons, and Walker had his struggles against Detroit's elite defense, but he was still the only other member of the Heat outside of Shaq and Wade to average double figures, and would even drop 17 points in Game 1 to help Miami steal one in Detroit, as overall the Heat would take the series in 6 to advance to their first NBA Finals in franchise history. The finals brought one of Walker's old teams, and Walker looked determined over the first 2 games, as he was averaging over 18 points. Yet Miami had lost both. But then over the next 4, Wade took over, and while he did most of the heavy lifting this series, Miami's second leading scorer would actually be Walker, with Walker even dropping 10 points in the third quarter of Game 6.
Ball stolen by Wade, going with Udonis. Bounce pass to Walker, in Walker, layup, got it!
Antoine Walker has been huge
to help keep Miami in it, before Wade closed it out in the 4th, to give Miami their first title in franchise history, and Walker was now an NCAA and NBA champion, and had accomplished it with his former Kentucky teammate in Derek Anderson, as Walker's season ended with him averaging about 12 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. The following season was not great for the Heat, as the team dealt with a lot of injuries and behind-the-scenes conflict, and while Walker remained healthy, he didn't adhere to Pat Riley's infamous conditioning requirements, and his play took a huge hit, as he went from the best shooting season of his career to one of his worst, averaging less than 10 points per game and even shooting below 44% from the free throw line. And with such a dysfunctional season, which saw the Heat put out one of the league's worst offenses, they only managed a 44-38 record and got a first-round rematch with Chicago. Walker would come off the bench for this playoff run and would again be Miami's third leading scorer. However, this run didn't last long, as Chicago didn't just beat Miami, they embarrassed them with a sweep, and Walker's year ended with him averaging about 8.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. But Walker was added to yet another trade prior to the 08 season. Shortly before the season began, Walker was included in a package sent to Minnesota, as he was joining a Wolves team who were going full rebuild after recently trading Kevin Garnett. And while Walker would appear in 46 games off the bench to start the season, he didn't really want to be there. And after some disagreements with the front office over a contract buyout, he would miss the final 2 months of the year, as overall he would average 8 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. After the season, Walker was included in another trade, which brought Minnesota Kevin Love, as he was sent to the Grizzlies, but would be waived before playing a game for them, which unexpectedly marked the end of his NBA career. He would go on to spend a bit of time overseas, and even attempt an NBA comeback by joining the D-League. However, after 2 years with the Idaho Stampede, he announced his retirement in 2012. And unfortunately, even after earning over $100 million as a player, Walker's post-playing days were marred by the consequences of poor financial decisions on both a personal and business level, as Walker became an example to many young athletes of how not to manage your money, even appearing on the 30 for 30 titled Broke. But in more recent years, Walker seems to be doing better and can be seen on a variety of podcasts telling his story. Antoine Walker was an anomaly as a player, one of the rare guys you could call positionless. He may not have been amazing at every position, but he possessed the skills to play any position. But he also seemed okay with coasting on natural ability and supreme confidence. He could hang with anyone, but struggled with weight issues and shot selection his whole career, which held him back from potentially being an all-time great. And even though he may have underachieved, he could drop 20 points with his eyes closed, and could give you a triple-double on any night. And while he didn't return the Celtics to glory, he made them watchable, and along with Paul Pierce, gave Boston fans some memorable moments. And at the end of the day, he made his mark in college and the NBA, and has championships at both levels to prove it. But that's it for today's episode on Antoine Walker. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on his Kentucky teammate, or this one on a guy he played with during his early years in Boston. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.